Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Post stories of reality glitches or nonsensical occurrences. I haven't had much, if any, paranormal or glitch-like experiences, but here's one that I've yet to wrap my head around. Be kid, below 10, but can't remember exactly how old I was. Throughout my childhood, I had this very vivid memory of my mother holding me while she had a conversation with a man leaning on a light blue motorcycle, or moped. It takes place in Cuba, where my mom is from. Never thought much of it. For context, small towns in places like Cuba are usually very tight-knit. Everyone knows each other, and they rarely get people that move in. One day asked Mom, "Mommy, I remember you talking to this one guy back in Cuba who had a blue motorcycle and X features. What family member was that?" She tells me I described her dad. Her dad died years before I was ever born. This happened so long ago, and as I got older, I've lost more and more memory of that occurrence. Could it have just been a coincidence? Or maybe I'm misremembering? I don't know. But my mom seemed pretty certain of who I was describing, and I took her word for it. And it's one of the only things I've really experienced that I can't wrap my head around.
Be me. Out for a walk with my wife. See a cat sitting in someone's yard. I feel compelled to point out the cat to my wife. My wife says there's no cat there. Think she's just looking in the wrong place. Point to it and describe its location. There's no cat there. It's broad daylight. The cat is less than 30 feet away. I am not mistaken. There is a cat there. Try to explain the cat's location more. Pass by a tree. The cat's gone. The tree wasn't some 1,000-year-old oak tree. I should have been able to see a cat on one side, a tree in the middle, and a cat on the other. But as I moved by the tree, the cat just vanished. The cat was stationary, so I don't think I just lost track of it. We were somewhat busy and I wasn't expecting a supernatural encounter, so I didn't think at the time to back up and look again from the first side of the tree. About a year later, I found what I'm like 85% sure was the same cat wandering around not too far away. Though I was alone that time, so I don't have anyone to verify if the cat was real that time either.
I got a sort of history of seeing the future in dreams, but this one stands out to me the most. B12. It's the Christmas Eve of 2012. Go to bed. I have a dream that I'm using a laptop in the living room. Stuff happens in dreams, but it's not important. Wake up. Thought, that was interesting. Parents are up. We decide to open the presents. I got a laptop. I was so amazed that I got one. I didn't even think about the dream. My family was poor, and the only time I thought I'd get a PC would be a lot later, nor was I ever given any hints or asked about it. I had a great time setting up my PC so I could play Portal 2 co-op with my dad. Skip about 8 years later, B20, using the same laptop in the living room, still am to write this too, realized that the setup of the house was exactly like how it is now. Realized the laptop was the exact one that was in the dream. The only time the house would have looked like that is at that point in time, 8 years later. How did 12-year-old me know what a 20-year-old me's house would look like? The house had changed a lot over the years, and so did the area I'd used the PC in. I wasn't the one who'd arranged the house either, so I wasn't the one who made it as such. I still remember the image of the dream really well too. It just always sort of stuck with me. Never told anyone about the dream until I realized the coincidence. What do you anons think? Have any of you had something like that happen?
I was with my father visiting family in upstate New York back in 2018. Taking a nice walk through the suburbs, I saw a huge old stone building, looked Victorian or whatever, similar to image related. It's a little grown over, but looks very nice, even has stone walls around it. It was basically the perfect creepy old house from all the movies. It's for sale. We thought about getting it because we wanted to move at the time. Didn't have our computer with us, so trying to look up the house via phone was a pain. Try asking the family who lived in the area about it. They knew the area very well, and drove down every road there. They had no idea what we were talking about. Gave up and just enjoyed the time we had there with family. Later, after getting back home, we tried to look the house up. Look up the area on multiple real estate sites. Nothing. Go by already sold and new on market. Nothing. Weird. Decide to use Google Maps. Go by the exact paths we walked. I can't find it. WTF, man. Ask family to try driving by the area. They do. Still nothing. Father and I think that's weird. Decide to remember to try finding the house next time we visit. Now last year, visiting. Go along the same path multiple times, drive the path multiple times, look along other paths, ask the family about it one more time. It's all for nothing. Father and I agreed we had to have seen something that wasn't there.
Be driving to work. In a rundown older car, but it gets the job done. It's on the highway and there's a long line at the exit. For one reason or another, I had to slam on the brakes. I ended up losing control, my car spun, and I ran into the guardrail on the right side of the road. Mind you, the exit and line was there too. It's not bad, but I'm fine and managed to not hit another car. Look to my left and there's absolutely no cars there. The line is just gone. I thought I must have gone unconscious for a time because there's no other way it could have been that way, but it definitely didn't feel like I did. The road was completely empty, so I was able to reverse and keep driving. A few cars were coming by the time I started back up again.
Is not that spooky but weird nonetheless. I'm not going to greentext because I may ruin it. This happened to me when I was a kid. I grew up and lived in a small city all the way until I left for college. My city is very small, a valley actually, so the city has problems growing up because all the space is already occupied. When I was a kid, there weren't any tall buildings. The tallest were structures with 3 floors max. Even to this day, there isn't, aside from a few exceptions. This will be relevant for the story. Also, we had a terrible hospital that was due to close in a few years. At the time, I had a best friend whom I used to visit and play video all night. And in the morning, we had some treks in the nearby hills. He lived up the valley where the city kind of ends and the desert begins. I remember that Resident Evil 4 had just come out and we were hyped, so like the kids we went out and pretended it was like the game. Actually pretty fitting because being a South American city and not that big, it looked kind of familiar to Resident Evil 4, but crapper. We walked for a couple of hours following a dirt road with a dense fog. It was early. Then it cleared out and we were close to the end of the city where the highway starts leaving it. Then something caught our attention, really far away in a place where there was nothing. Just some old houses. There was a shiny, modern-looking tall building, 6+ floors, with big windows like big city stuff, and it was in the middle of nowhere. We stood there perplexed because we had no idea what was it and why we haven't seen it before. We joke about some secret umbrella lab out there and we try to reach it. But it was impossible due to the houses with barbed wire or thick fences that couldn't let us pass. Without mention that it was private property that we had to enter to get there. But there it was at the distance, the most modern building in all the city alone with no signs of people around. So we left it and keep walking. Flash forward a few days and I passed by the car with my family near the place where in theory the building should be. To my surprise, it wasn't there. Nothing. I could have sworn that the place was right there, but nothing, just a dirty wasteland. I asked my family and they didn't know anything, so I forgot about it. Flash forward again, this time years, I don't know how much, but it could have been like 8 years. I came back to the city to visit my family after a semester on college, and they told me about how the city has changed. They told me about how the old hospital was closed and built a new one, the most modern in the region, even bigger than other cities around. So they took me to see it, and in that moment I had like a hard flashback. To my surprise, there it was, the same building I saw many years ago when it wasn't even planned yet. It blew my mind and I told them, but they didn't care. So there it was, the weirdest thing that has happened to me. To finish the story, I have to say that my best friend at the time is no longer my friend. We don't really talk because we don't share many interests. But someday not so long ago, I saw him on the street and chat for a little bit. So I asked him about it, and the guy opened some big eyes when I told him, and he said, "You are not crazy. I remember it too." He had no reason to lie. He is one of those kind of people with no sense of humor that only speak serious stuff. But there he was, confirming what I was starting to believe it could have been some misplaced memory. But it wasn't that I saw the damn thing before it even existed.
Be a paperboy. Throwing a route I have done for years. Get to this street that is a stretch of houses that are across from a long park. In the middle of the street is a cul-de-sac. Drive to the cul-de-sac part. WTF.jpg. It's not there. Instead, 3 houses are taking the spot where the cul-de-sac entrance is. I am incredibly confused. Drive down the street, then back up the street. I still can't find the cul-de-sac. I'm incredibly confused. Stop the car in front of the new 3 houses. They look perfectly normal. Take out my phone and use Google Streets. Yep, I'm in the right spot. I can see the cul-de-sac on the map. Look up and the cul-de-sac is back.
I don't know if this counts as a glitch or whatever, but it's always been the weirdest thing that ever occurred to me. 7 years old. Go to bed 'cause bedtime. The room I sleep in is basically right in front of the kitchen. Clearly see all appliances right out of the door. For context, if I exit my room, I'm in the kitchen, go right, and I'll hit a hallway with a bathroom. And after that, my parents' room, go left from my room and the kitchen and enter the living room. As I'm falling asleep, I feel as is the room is vibrating. Wake up, it's still dark. Headache. Everything looks really hazy. I'm in my parents' bed. Get up and start walking out to go to my room. Completely avoid and walk past room. Go to living room and look out the window. Haziness gets worse. Walk back to the kitchen. Look into my room. See myself sitting down on the corner of my bed looking dead at me. Eyes wide open, confused. Say, "Why are you awake?" Me on bed goes, "Huh? I don't know." Say, "Go back to sleep, it's late." Walk back to my parents' room and everything fades to black. Wake up again, this time in my own bed. Can smell food. Mom's making breakfast. Walk out and say good morning. Think to myself what a weird dream that was. Mom asks me why I was awake in the middle of the night just sitting in the corner of my bed. Get chills and feel every hair follicle rise. What? Mom tells me exactly what I thought I had dreamt. I never told her I dreamt it or thought I did. I still don't know what to make of it.
The craziest and closest thing I've ever had to a paranormal or glitch experience was when I was driving in Daytona Beach one day. Driving down a straight road during the daytime, unfamiliar with where I am. Going past all kinds of easily identifiable landmarks like restaurants and gas stations and whatnot. 5 or 10 minutes goes by on this long road before I realize I should probably use GPS to get home. Look down at the phone for a couple seconds, look back up at the road, and I am literally passing everything I had already passed 5 minutes ago, as if I had made a big circle. Road is totally straight with no curves. Pull into a gas station and question life for a while. Seems simple, but it was the first and only time anything like that has ever happened in my life, and it scared the piss out of me.
There's a highway near the house I grew up in that used to be called Lafitte-La Rose Highway. Nowadays, it's mostly built up and has highway lights, but when I first began to drive, it used to be dark and wooded. One night, my friend and I were riding down the road. We had just left our shift working as drivers at the local Domino's and wanted to blow off steam. Back then, Lafitte-La Rose Highway was pretty much known as a wooden freeway, where cops were never, ever to be found patrolling. So of course it was the place to speed as fast as humanly possible. I rode in the back of my friend's truck while he drove down this highway. At one point we saw on the side of the road an old wooden rocking chair. Inside the rocking chair, looking directly back at us, was a skinny, bony old lady with bright glowing eyes wearing a raggedy dress. Needless to say, this lady's appearance freaked us out. We drove to the nearest cut through the neutral ground and turned around. Not only was that lady gone, but so was the rocking chair. We drove up and down that stretch of highway a few times looking but found absolutely nothing. Back in the day, that stretch of highway was lonely and little traveled, unlike now. We both saw what we saw and have no explanation for it.
I am almost positive this can be attributed to my incredibly overactive imagination when I was younger, but this was something I begged, pleaded, desperately tried to get my parents to believe, and they never did. 5 or 6 years old, lying in bed, it was a wooden, bulky bunk bed with a ladder on one end. I had a stuffed German shepherd. I named him Butterscotch and kept him with me. The stuffed animal was pretty large, roughly the size of a regular German shepherd, and it was permanently in a sitting position. One night, trying to sleep. Very tired, so it must have been 6 p.m. when I decided to go try and sleep. Light on in the hallway, but I still can't see anything inside my room aside from silhouettes. Remember being able to hear the television downstairs. What happened next, I'm not making up for an epic X, I swear on my life. Either this happened or I thought it did on a level that I will never forget. Butterscotch, who was near the ladder, began growling. Growling escalates, growls louder and louder, never barked but growled like he was very angry. I began to whimper and babble, no idea how to react. Work up the courage to get up and run all the way downstairs into the living room, where my mom, dad, and sister are watching TV. I was in hysterics. No one believed me. Eventually, Butterscotch got beat up, and I had to throw him out, but he growled. That stuffed dog growled at me.
My dad's an avid cyclist, and when I was a kid, he had this trailer he would hook to his bike with 2 rear-facing seats for me and my sister, or a friend to sit in. We moved a lot growing up, but the basic timeline is we lived in Texas until I was 6-ish, then we moved to Tennessee. While living in Tennessee, I think I was 7 at the time, I rode in the trailer with my dad on a bike ride. Sunny day, I'm enjoying the sights. Then suddenly I'm on the couch in our home in Texas, 4 years old again. And my dad is doing his post-workout stretches from a bike ride we apparently just returned from. It was so sudden, like reality just snapped. I learned to read in school when I was 5 or 6. Or at least that's how it went on my first go. This time I arrived in kindergarten already literate. The broad strokes of my life in those 3 years went basically the same. But there were differences. One that stood out was the first time we moved to Tennessee. During the road trip there, my sister and I got in a huge, prolonged fight over some stupid kid stuff and clawed each other's faces. The second time went by without incident.
Was driving along the highway when all of a sudden a car ran off the road and into the forest, just plowed straight into the brush. Called 911, reported it. Lady asked me if I was sure because that same thing had been reported twice already this month, and both times the first responders got out and couldn't find anything. Told her I was sure and just went about my day thinking it seemed weird, but I didn't really think much of it. Turned the local news on that night after work and they were reporting on rescue crews finding a car in the forest off the highway. I looked, and it was the same place that I had sent it and what I called in. But they said in the car the bodies they found were decomposing, and it looked like it had been at least 2 weeks since it had run off the road. Freaked me out. I don't know if I saw something separate or if that was it, but it was literally the exact same spot and the same type of car.
Anywho, I got one that I always like to tell people. Me around 6 years old or so. Family goes to this campsite thing every fall. Relatively small wooded area. At least that's how my parents recall it. With campgrounds in this creepy model western town in the middle of it. Complete with mannequins in the buildings and everything. Sitting at the entrance to the place minding my own business. Kid comes up and asks me to watch his annoying little dog. Kid me takes pride in being responsible for something and agrees. Guy's gone for 2 seconds and the dog bolts into the town, cut through the main street and into the woods on the other side. Chase the dog through the forest until I'm out of breath and lose sight of it. Scared that I'm lost in the woods. Find a house in the woods decorated with candy canes, probably early decorating for Christmas. Instantly freak out that I just found a house of candy in the woods. No other choice, so I knocked on the door. 2 old women live there. They get me some water and take me back to the campgrounds, back through the town area. Get back and the dog is sitting in the entrance where we had been at the start. Can't remember much after that moment. Now the glitchy seeming part. Talked to my mother about this as a 20-something adult. She remembers the place and me telling her all this before. Notes that they didn't worry or anything because she had only left me sitting there for about 5 minutes and came back to find me crying. If you can, ask people you know about the weird things from your past. Sometimes they remember things that make it even spookier.
This happened to me a few days ago. I was house sitting for friends that live somewhat out of the city. After a day of practice shooting, photography, I drove back to their house. To get to their house, there is a lengthy stretch of road that crosses a valley. It has no streetlights and has a small bridge you drive over. It's some Sleepy Hollow shit. It's close to 1 a.m., and I notice the full moon and the creepy fog over the valley. and thought I'd try and practice my long exposure nighttime shooting. Because, you know, learning. After I cross the bridge, I pull over to the side of the road. Unfortunately, I do not have my tripod to keep still, so I open my window and balance my camera as still as I can on my side mirror and start to take 1-minute long exposure shots. I'm not really equipped well for this type of night photography, but I'm doing my best. The process was taking forever to get things in focus. If you don't know how long exposure shooting works, basically, you hit the shutter button, the camera screen, if you have your LCD screen on, turns black. You hold your camera as still as possible for the duration of the picture being taken, in this case 1 or 2 minutes. You hear the click when it's finished, and check the photo by turning on the LCD screen again. I had to do this drawn-out process several times, but was finally getting some of the shots in focus. The neat thing about long exposure shots is that it illuminates your scene. Essentially, it lets you see in the dark. The whole valley was nearly black, but with some things being lit by the moon, so getting these long exposure shots allowed me to see everything like the grass and such that I couldn't see before. Being that the field is too dark to see with the naked eye, I always had to check my shots on the LCD screen afterwards to see what was in focus and guess where my next shot would be. But then, I noticed something. I noticed a man standing in the field. It's the middle of the night. Why the hell is this dude wandering in the middle of the field? Doesn't even have a flashlight. I start to freak out. Curious on why this guy is just out in the field, I continue to take more long exposure shots just to see what he's up to. Every shot I took, my camera would go black, and I would be sitting in perfect darkness, waiting for the timer to go off to check the picture, since it was the only way I could see him in the field. It was pretty much some fatal frame shit. With each shot, I realized the man was getting larger and closer. He was walking towards my car. I start to really freak out. But being a cliché slasher victim character, instead of driving off, what do? I decided to take more pictures instead. Heart's pounding, and I'm panicking, wondering if he sees me. This was the last photo I took. The man seems to be bending over or something. I clearly heard an odd cracking or screeching noise after this, and footsteps on the grass. I decide he's obviously running at me, so I nope out and drive away as fast as possible. Keep in mind these pics were taken when somewhat zoomed in, so he appears closer than he actually is.
Be me last year, coming back from visiting family in Virginia with my dad. I live in Massachusetts, so it's a long-ass drive. Get back to Mass at around 2 a.m. On the highway, Dad's tired and misses our exit. At least 45 minutes out from Boston. Less than 10 minutes go by and suddenly we're in Cambridge. WTF.PNG. Driving through Boston and we see literally nobody. No cars, no people walking, the whole city is silent and empty. Something feels super creepy. Drive through Boston and get back on the highway. Takes a full 45 minutes to get home. Dad jokes we were abducted by aliens. Both of us are super unsettled though. I've lived in Mass all my life and have never seen Boston so empty before. Even in the middle of the night. It was weird.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.